Some of these experiments will shock and terrify you, especially considering for some instances the subjects were not even aware what was happening to them, and even worse, they were funded by the government. Hopefully nothing like this will happen again, but the stories will haunt you. So let's jump into the top 5 terrifying science experiments that will haunt you. Coming in at number 5, we have chainsaw. Do you know why the chainsaw was invented? If you don't, then this might surprise you. Surprisingly, the chainsaw was not invented for cutting down trees or any type of manual work. It was actually invented to help with childbirth. And by help, it was more of an unnecessary torture, making a painful experience much worse. 2 Scottish doctors, John Aitken and James Jeffrey, invented the tool in the 1780s. Before the caesarean section was common practice, all babies had to pass through the birth canal. When the baby became stuck or breached, the doctor would remove the parts of the pelvis bone. This was medically known as symphysiotomy. This was a painful and messy procedure that was performed without any anesthesia. The doctors complained that the procedure took a long time as they had to remove the bone by hand. They invented a small chainsaw to make the procedure faster for them to perform, but still incredibly painful. For women, the procedure had a high risk of infection, injury, and even long-term walking difficulty. It could ruin their lives, as well as the high risks already associated with childbirth from that time. In the 20th century, the use of this procedure became obsolete when improvements in hygiene and technique made the caesarean section much safer. It wasn't until the 1920s that the chainsaw began to be developed for use in forestry work. Coming in at number 4, we have the Stanford Prison Experiment. The Stanford Prison Experiment is a famous experiment conducted in 1971. There have been documentaries and even a film created based on the story of what happened to the participants. Dr. Zimbardo wanted to create a social experiment to see how people would react when put into certain roles. Would they behave as their usual self or mold to their new role? The 2-week experiment took place in a prison environment. It soon became controversial when the public saw the details and heard from those involved. Some questioned the scientific validity and called the methods deeply flawed. Once approved by the university, they placed an ad for male college students to participate in a psychological study. 75 applied for the study, and after screening, 24 were accepted. The applicants were predominantly white, middle class, and appeared to be psychologically healthy and stable. They chose people without criminal background or any medical problems. They were then randomly separated into 2 groups, one being inmates and the others guards. They were paid $100 a day to participate for 14 days. Within as little as 5 days, the group had fallen into chaos. The guards took on the stereotypes of what a prison guard should be in their eyes. They all became cruel and made choices to impact the prisoners, such as limit their food or make them wear bags on their head. They allowed a visit from family on the 5th day. Parents were concerned about the well-being of their children and threatened to contact lawyers to get them removed from the experiment. A colleague of Dr. Zimbardo visited the experiment the same day and was disgusted by the behavior she witnessed. She also noted that the doctor had also seen behavior changes in his role as the warden. She said she didn't recognize him. He was acting so out of character. Due to her findings, the parents' outrage, and the increasing brutality, the experiment was cancelled just 6 days in. The doctor went on to publish his views on the study, how the power of authority can change people's personality, or the situation you're in can make you do horrible things you never would have before. Some of the participants have spoken out about the study, explaining how it made them feel at the time. Luckily, none of them mentioned long-lasting psychological effects. Coming in at number 3, we have Guatemala syphilis experiments. The Guatemala syphilis experiments were United States-led human experiments conducted from 1946 to 1948. Although I'm sure the effects of this experiment lasted far past that. The experiments were led by a doctor named Charles Cutler. The idea for the study was to infect soldiers, prisoners, and mentally ill patients with syphilis and other sexually transmitted diseases. The worst part about this was that none of the participants were aware that they were even part of the study. The United States wanted to see the effects that the disease would have on their participants over a long period of time. There were at least 30 documented deaths due to the experiment, but that number could be much higher. These diseases can cause infertility, blindness. It can make you paralyzed and even cause dementia. There is a long list of horrible things that were inflicted on these people that would have affected them and future generations for years following. The experiments were uncovered in 2005 while someone was researching into studies around it. It wasn't until 2010 when the US government formally apologized for their actions. They admitted to violating human rights and that committing the study was a crime against humanity. There have since been a number of lawsuits filed against the US government for what they did to the community. People want answers as to why and how this could have happened. What makes this worse is that this was not the first study of its kind conducted by the US Public Health Study. They did the exact same thing in 1932 to Tuskegee. 600 sharecroppers were found and hired in Alabama. Again, none of them were told they had been given the disease. They were only told they'd be given free healthcare, meals, and burial insurance. Even after penicillin was proven to cure the disease, the study continued until 1972, 25 years after the cure was found. In addition to the original subjects, the victims of the trial passed the disease onto their wives, and their children were born with it also. They tried to cover up both trials, but Bill Clinton formally apologized in 1997 to those affected after it had been uncovered. Coming in at number 2, we have experimentation in the Soviet Union. In 1921, the Soviet Union started to do human experimentation. They built 2 laboratories for experiments with poison called Laboratory 1, Laboratory 12, and Chimera. They wanted these studies to be covert so that they would be able to use it against their enemies. They would take prisoners from the forced labor camps called the Gulag and bring them to the facilities. While there, they would give them a meal. It would be poisoned, but they would not be told this. They would first see if they noticed the smell or taste of the poison, and then they would examine the body to see if there were any trace of it in their system. Their goal was to find the perfect poison, one that didn't have a smell or taste and that could not be detected post-mortem. Over the time of the experiments, they tested poisons including mustard gas, ricin, digitoxin, and cura. They continued their experiments for most of the 21st century. And finally, in at number 1, we have testing on American military. During World War II, scientists who were funded by the US government conducted experiments using American Navy soldiers. They were given the green light to prepare for the use of chemical warfare, something that was used frequently in World War I. There were at least 9 research projects dedicated to this study. They wanted to test the effectiveness of a new type of clothing and gas mask against the deadly gas. 17 and 18-year-olds were approached after they had completed boot camp. They were only asked if they would participate in a study that would shorten the length of the war. They were not told what they would be doing. Only once the boys reached the research facility were they told that it involved mustard gas. Almost all of the participants suffered from severe external and internal burns. Once they left the facility, they were ignored by the Navy. In some cases, they were threatened by the Espionage Act. They were told that they would be punished if they were to tell anyone about the study that they were involved in. Under the Espionage Act, anyone sharing information about the war effects were considered a criminal. So if the enemies learned of these experiments, they would lose their upper hand if they had one. In 1991, the reports of what happened were finally declassified and were taken before Congress. There were 60,000 US soldiers who took part in the trial. Well, there we have it. Do you guys agree with our list? Which of these experiments scared you the most? Leave us all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below, and perhaps we can do a part 2. Before I go though, I just want to respond to a comment from one of our past videos. Joe Johnson said, well, the look you sport is a lot better, but because you host goth doesn't mean you have to dress like it. You could do so much more and have it to do with it. So surprise us and try something different, maybe a nice dress or just a little frilly wear up to you. Just seem more for you, and it's not in dark gothic wear yet, to each their own, and just figured I'd throw my 2 cents in. God bless you guys, keep it up, great work. I love a run-on sentence and one that doesn't make sense at all. Just because I host goth doesn't mean I need to dress goth. Sorry, when do I dress goth? And also, have you not seen my summer vids? I wear dresses, get with the times. Also, I don't dress for you, I dress for me. So, I was gonna say something. See you later, Joe Johnson. And on that note, if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, and until next time, I'll see you later.